I appreciate it. Thank you. So this was a test I did over the weekend. It was Monday. And basically I'm using these emitters to shoot out flip particles. And over time, the viscosity is increased, or it becomes more stiff. And I was also using divergence to expand stuff. So at the start of the lifespan, there's a noise that's masking out areas, but there is some divergence that's being used to grow everything. So that's a pretty cool one. These were some flip books of just recent tests that I was doing between then and now. Basically removing gravity, trying some different settings for all the different stuff, adding drag, and just seeing what was going on. I also trying to get some textures and stuff like that working. Like using rest position assigned to the flip particles so that you could texture them and add some detail and stuff like that. Do a stream on creating different procedural noise with Material X nodes. Some of the recent streams I did talk a little bit about that. There was this one here that was just a general material mixing, but there was a little bit of procedural noises and stuff like that that I touched on in that one. So this is all Material X stuff. Just doing some basic distortion by displacing the position from one noise to another. But yeah, maybe in the future I'll get deeper into some of the Material X stuff. How did you move the emitters? So yeah, basically there's a Vellum wire simulation or hair simulation that's pushing these things around. So it's two-stage simulation. There's basically a Vellum simulation at the start, and then that's being fed into the flip stop network. So I don't know. I mean, I was just doing early testing, or like just to see what was happening with the settings, but eventually you might be able to get these coupled together so that they're like feeding back with each other. But for right now, just as I was testing stuff and setting stuff up, that wasn't my main goal to get like a bidirectional simulation. It was just to figure out some of the forces with flip and stuff like that. But yeah, I think some of these later ones, I was getting some interesting interaction between the different parts of the flip. Due to, there's also some surface tension that's being added in. So like this one right here, let me just isolate it here. This area right here like gets gooey or sticks, clings together, and then pulls apart from the surface tension and the viscosity and all that stuff. So I thought that was a pretty cool like behavior or kind of quality characteristic to get in the simulation. But yeah, we can get started taking a look at it. I'd just set up a quick test render before starting the stream. This has only been going for like 20 minutes or something like that, but just to get a feel for the texturing or the rest coordinates that I was trying out. I didn't have a ton of time to really finesse them that much, but seems like they're doing a good job of adding in the detail. So I'll just kill this thing once the next frame kicks in and I get the LUT applied. for whatever reason, the redshift render view, like until the next frame starts rendering it, it keeps the color spaces like out of whack for a little bit. It is a little bit fondue-y. it's a I don't know, it's like the heat sealed foam or whatever. I don't know, use it for like insulation or to fill gaps in foundation or something like that. But yeah, I was still working a little bit on these attributes. I don't have any motion blur or velocity or stuff like that, so it's still an early test. But yeah, I was trying to get some of these shader noises to stick and move with the simulation. It's kind of doing that, but I definitely need to spend a little bit more time on the rendering and shading side of things. But yeah, we could go through the setup here. Let me just reposition some of these windows. And we'll get into it. So yeah, basically for these emitters, or the wires, the tentacles, just start out with copying wires or lines to points, and then using the roots or the tips from these procedural group by range. You can basically either get the ends or the starts, and then under connectivity, you just have to make sure that it's affecting disconnected geometry separately. And then you can pin or constrain different groups individually. So here I'm just getting the roots and pinning them. I'm also setting like an overall soft constraint just so that they have a tendency to return to their original positions, but it's like very low or very soft. When you export the project files, are they incompatible with the Learning Edition? If you're exporting geometry, that stuff should be compatible with every version. The Houdini Indie scene files or project files, you should still be able to open them with the Learning Edition. But I don't think you could go the other way. If you save them with the Learning Edition, like you would get a watermark going back to the Indie edition. Get rid of those flying pieces. Yeah, you can definitely filter them out and do some stuff. I feel like some of them, I was liking the way that some of them looked. It definitely gives it a more like explosive. Some of it's a little too much. Like some of this little bits kind of tearing off or ripping off gives some interesting detail to things. But yeah, for sure you can do filtering, or there was stuff in the simulation that I was doing as well to control how much of that stuff rips off. So we have another Prime sub from Marcos Savignano. Sorry, I'm not the greatest at pronouncing everyone's name, but I appreciate the 4 months. Thank you. So that's basically all that's happening with this Vellum. And yeah, I think you could do different things with the small particles that rip off. You could like not surface them, like using the VDB methods, and I think that way they wouldn't be as distracting if they're just very microscopic or small. We can talk about that a little bit later on. And then in here, using the pop force, I'm just only having it affect the tips or the tops. So this is just gonna blow around or shake the tops of things, and that's pretty much all that I was doing with that. area, and then just to visualize things, I was using the wire saw and using this orient along curve, and then just copying tubes or tube primitives to the top of them, and as well basically initializing this velocity before they get copied. So once they end up here, if we just go into the wireframe, turn on velocity, should show up. Maybe I just need to get rid of these displayers. Yeah, I think overall I'm still playing around with lots of these settings and just trying to find things that look interesting. But yeah, for sure, I think, I don't know, I could use more expansion. Some of these, I think the latest sims I was doing do have too many of this, and then the way that I was rendering it, they're getting definitely too big and globular. So here you can see the velocities. So basically this is just starting going up, and that's going to be like the injection direction basically. And then with this trail, I'm basically computing the motion between frames or the history. So we're adding some kind of momentum or inertia vector basically. And here you just use this simple expression. Just basically you can layer in as much as you want of the inertia or momentum, and you can use this to scale it. So that would basically have more of the sprayers like thing, kind of fling it in different directions or whatever. So it's a interesting control to build in. Max. Thank you for the tier 1. I appreciate it. And then I'm just calling this the emitters. And because right now they're primitives, there's just a single point that's representing all of it. So to get velocity that's occupying more of the space, I'm converting it to polygons and then just filling the surface with points. And then here, this is just a standard flip source. So it's creating the surface, and then inside of these is the particles. We can see them like this. So those are the actual flip particles, and then that's the volumetric or the surface SDF. And I just have this linked to my flip solver inside of there. And then this is just getting these velocities. And I'm also adding some kind of crazy sprayer velocity to break things up. So that's that frequency and velocity of the noise that I'm adding on top does control quite a bit of this look, I would say, overall. So that's how you, I don't know, I was kind of liking a little bit of these sharp spikes, but I think in some cases it was way too much. But I think it is, like, if you take that away completely, you just end up with these. I think it's closer to the reference for sure, just to have this kind of stuff, but I was playing around and just seeing what kind of shapes and stuff like that I could get with everything. So yeah, and then this basically is just storing the current position, capturing it to use as the rest position. And that's what I was using in this test render to do this fine scale noise or whatever that you kind of need with simulations, like flip simulations. Super hard to get all of this detail just based off of like the particles or whatever. So I don't know if you're trying to do something more organic, or someone in the Discord was mentioning the Eric Ferguson style. I don't think I can show Eric Ferguson's work on stream, but you can look it up on your own, and it's definitely very organic and very ooey gooey. Coffee Grains, good to see you. So yeah, that's basically all we have going into it at this point, is that we've calculated the emitter motion and then extracted the like momentum and velocity and all that. And then for the flip simulation, I'm going to clean this up a little bit here. I don't think I need those anymore. Like I said at the start, I was doing some stuff with gravity, and I basically just removed that. And I'm just going to organize this so it's not as messy. I don't think we need that. I don't think we need that. And I think that makes it more, hopefully, a little easier to understand. So it's a pretty standard flip setup, just using drag here, and then this wrangle is like the only kind of new thing or thing that's out of the ordinary. And basically with this one, like I was saying at the start of the particle or the flip lifespan, there is the divergence attribute, and that's being masked or multiplied basically in this range of age. So from 0.05 to 0.45, it will go from 1 to 0. And this age is in seconds, time in seconds for the particles have been alive. So that's what gives you this shape for the initial expansion. And the only thing you need to be sure if you're going to use this is that here you have divergence by attribute turned on, and then as well on the flip object, you need to make sure that you have the divergence field turned on under the initial data. I think if you don't do this, the attribute won't have any effect. So that's something to be sure about, or to double check. And then under the physical tab here, you can control the viscosity, and then that's getting multiplied or affected by this ramp or this age value as well. So this is kind of going the other way, and over time it starts out more squishy or easier to move around, and then the viscosity goes up, kind of this exponential increase over time, and that makes it get stiffer, or basically, I don't know, like if you have a foam gun, like basically it cools or something happens that makes it hold its form more. That was my thought process behind things. And then this starting thing is just divergence that's getting its base kind of amount or scale, and then that's getting masked spatially by a noise. So some areas might, I feel like it's more natural if you have some areas that expand more than others. If it's all just uniform, you get very like spherical shapes. Like this one would just be uniform with no noise driving it. So it's just very, I don't know, it's just like a blur at that point, and it's less organic or less natural, I would say. So that's pretty much all that there is to it. And then the surface tension I was playing around with, but basically using the particle attributes to drive viscosity and divergence, and then this one was like a global attribute, global amount. I have a feeling in their tests, I think some of these examples here, it was looking like the black particles are high surface tension, or they are getting surface tension, and the white particles weren't getting surface tension. And you can kind of see those black particles get pulled together, or cling back together, because I think they're getting surface tension added to them. It's just my guess, though. I don't really know what 100% what is getting visualized or what the settings are, stuff like that. But yeah, I'm planning to continue playing around with this, and maybe I'll investigate and see how this surface tension can be driven using an attribute. But for right now, I just left it as like a global setting. So that's pretty much all there is to it that's non-default flip. But for the most part, it's pretty much default settings. So I'll just say this is divergence. Divergence and viscosity attributes. And then some drag just to kind of help with the anti-gravity look, or to have things kind of slow down over time. And that's pretty much it. So I'm just pulling the particles back in down here and doing the typical kind of post-processing chain of events. But overall, I'd say it's still pretty straightforward in just testing things. Let me just try to keep this somewhat organized. And maybe we want this stuff the other way around. And basically this is doing the VDB surface, or the meshed surface to things. And then this is creating rest coordinates. And I'm incorporating the age, the particle age, to basically have it update or shift the y component of the rest over time. So there is no UVs, it's just using the rest. So it's not necessarily textures like an image, it's just using the noise, which is using the rest coordinate. So if you want to check this out on your own, you can take a look here. You just need to rerun the cache. Down here, I just have it set up to go to the temporary directory. So yeah, Redshift will use the rest coordinates. This is the node that I was rendering from. Let me just do some more filtering to try to get rid of some of those bigger blobs. But yeah, Redshift by default, it's not really documented that well. So we'll do that, get into the camera, and this is like the foam. So these noises, even though the source is object, if you have rest attributes, it will automatically use that instead of like the world space position. And I think you can do a test if you wanted to examine that, or just verify. I've done it myself in my own time, so I know that it works. But if you wanted to test it yourself, basically what I would do, maybe just connect this. I'm going to turn off the displacement just so it's quicker to start rendering. High quality textures. I'm always looking for high quality textures. So I'm going to turn off those. And then if we maybe just disconnect this. So you can kind of already tell that it's getting moved around, or it's because I've done this stuff with the rest textures. If we switch this to just the cell noise, typically this would just be a grid, or it would be like a checkerboard arrangement, but because this is using the rest stuff, it's getting like squished around, it looks distorted or deformed. So if we just do save of that snapshot, and then we remove the rest attribute. And then we do another test, you'll see what it looks like without the rest attribute. So this is just a regular checkerboard or grid that's orthographic or whatever axis aligned, and then the rest attributes from the flip simulation that you kind of pick it up and drag it along with it. You might be able to do some triplanar projections of noise based off of the rest position and stuff like that. A bunch of marble. I think I was looking at these recently. They were doing, a lot of these are free, right? Like I think these, I was pulling some of these and I wanted to do some nice marble renders, but yeah, this site for sure has really good quality. Yeah, just in terms of this pattern and stuff, like I think compared a lot even to the ambient CG or whatever, they had really the best marble textures I've ever seen at Lot Pixel. These are, I don't know, just more uninteresting to me, I think, but I like these. They're very, it's like a luxury marble or something. But yeah, you could use these for other things like organic breakups and stuff like that. But yeah, for texturing stuff with just rest coordinates using images, I think you could set up a triplanar projection or something like that, but I'm not, it's definitely a more advanced thing than just using the redshift noises like this. It's already hooked, it would already get mapped up or something like that. So if you want to visualize some of this stuff, one way you can do that just to verify that these rest things are working, we could set the color from the rest, and right now it doesn't look too interesting because it's just like the position put into color. But if you maybe just get the Y component or the height, and then usually just using like a sine function, then you can crank that amplitude up and get like a visualization just to verify that your rest coordinates are working. So I'm just going to adjust that. Maybe we'll shift this into like the 0 to 1 range, like that. Maybe get back into the camera. Just make this a little sliver of a window. But yeah, this is another way that you could verify it. But I don't want to do that one. You can verify what these rest attributes or coordinates are doing. And then I actually made that window too small. So if we just look at the Y position, basically this wouldn't change too much over time, because like this stuff would just stay where it is. But if you add or you subtract or basically modulate it by the age, which is like the particle age or how long it's been alive, and you compare that with time, then you can start to kind of get more variation over the surface of everything. So that lets you, as stuff is like emitted, it would carry on with it or evolve the texture. So it's not just like a swimming texture, like it would basically get new values over time when it's based off emission time. Like instead of it just being always getting the same coordinate, it's like you're always kind of like sliding stuff up in y, if that makes sense. So that's another handy thing to work with those rest coordinates. But yeah, just try different frequencies or values, and you can get interesting results or whatever. And yeah, if you're looking to test some of this stuff, I would go maybe just up a little bit with the particle separation. And I think someone was talking about getting rid of those little bits flinging off. So the biggest thing that was causing that was these amplitude of that noise that I was like adding to the emitters. So if we reduce that to 15, I was using another expression there basically to throttle it or to like have some strobing stuff like that happening to the sprayers. So get like spread out and bring back in. Would that mean that if the particle position is in the place, that the texture would still progress? It's so if you run a noise through it, like the noise value would update, or it would be different over time. Like if you don't do that, you might get one black area that would like streak from the emitter all the way to the top. But if you offset the age with time and everything like that, you're kind of adding like a evolution over the duration of the emitter. It was something I talked about quite a bit, that was doing that foundation particle breakdown. Oh no. Oh no. So these ones here, I talk about it, basically doing a similar thing using the age and the life to run like another noise procedural texture through this simulation. So if I didn't offset it using the age, like it would just get the same value, would be constant over the lifespan. But if you offset it based off of the age, then you'll start to get new values or new noise coordinates or results over the duration of the particle life or history. Otherwise, you're kind of like extruding the same values and it doesn't fluctuate or it doesn't change at all. So here we just can bring in the flip visualization, and that would just let you see the colors or whatever that flip gets. Yeah, I mean, I'm just changing the y value, like yeah, I don't know. It might be too. It might be too much to talk about again. But but yeah, basically this is the Y position, and then this age and time, I'm basically recomputing the birth frame, like when the particle was emitted. So if you add the birth frame to the Y component of the noise, then you're getting different noise results from like the base to the tip. But if you don't do that, then you would get just like a 2D slice that's just the same values or whatever. So because you're synthesizing or generating textures or noise procedural patterns, if you feed in the same value from base to tip, you'll get the same result. But if you incorporate the birth, like the time that the particle was born, then you can control how much, like I think in some of these here, like it's kind of like stretching it over time. Like you would be able to basically choose how many of these rings or striations or whatever you would get based off of how quickly or how much frequency you're adding into that birth frame computation. Duck butt with vector thrust. How's it going? So yeah, I mean, maybe I'll do some more breakdowns later on or something, but that would be the idea behind that. It might be easier to see this way. Let me just make these bigger. So if I just multiply this by 0, we'll just slide one in there. You would get something close to the same result because the emitter is moving around. It is adjusting a little bit, but adding this in, you're basically able to influence how much of this is going to be like changed over the duration of the particle life. Is there a basic guide to Houdini particle shader render? Depends what render engine or what result and stuff you're after. There was a stream I did recently that was just covering somewhat of the basics of like not even really touching on particle simulation. I think this one, I was doing some procedural particle layouts, but I talk a little bit about the shading and rendering and stuff like that of particles. I don't know if I've seen any new ones that are using karma and things like that, but for rendering particles, I mean, it's highly dependent, I guess, on the renderer you're using. Like if it was Redshift, there's different shaders you'd be using. If it's Mantra, there's some different methods or different techniques you can use. With Karma and Material X, I was doing this stuff here with subsurface scattering and some translucency and stuff like that. That was interesting for this situation because you can get some kind of opacity, like accumulation of light, as like these are all kind of semi-transparent. So like here where these are overlapping, you get some blurring or combining of colors. But yeah, I think it depends on the look you're going for. Like you can make the particles even smaller and get something similar to Krakatoa, or you can make them even bigger and do something similar to motion graphics where you'd be like instancing bigger spheres or boxes or stuff like that onto the particles. But yeah, this is basically what this age stuff, you just use it to affect the kind of the history of the rest, if that makes sense. So you can see here that this is you're kind of squishing or compressing or stretching the amount of stuff. And I think at some point it just gets to be too much, because these particles are just emitted once per frame or substep. That would probably be a better idea to do this more frequently, or to use more substeps, and then you'll have more detail or more time to play with these results of the rest coordinates. But I think by default this doesn't do like subframe emission. I don't know. Sometimes people use the pop source node with the flip solver, but I don't know if it's that good of an idea. Have you guys ever tried? So I think this is just like the first context geometry. We could set this to the same thing and just do all points. So the reason why you would do this is basically the jitter birth time allows for, like, it will spread out that age attribute a little bit better than this is just going to take the exact shape and copy it every frame, but this does a better job at trying to break it up. I don't know if it will work though. Seems like it's still working. But if we take a look at that, over here you can see it's breaking up the age attribute a little bit better. So I think maybe doing something like that could be advantageous. The other thing is just doing more substeps up here. So it's going to be slower, obviously, but it would definitely give you more detail in the rest coordinates, or the rest attribute, because you're updating you're substepping the emitters more frequently for all the time steps. So if we take a look here, we should be able to crank these values higher, and you would start to, if you wanted to get really high frequency striations or stuff like that, it would be easier to achieve with this method, I think. So yeah, you could also, I guess, use this. Source particles, or you can use the flip source. But yeah, overall I would say these other things is mainly just based off of these settings here. So like I was saying at the start of the session, let me get rid of the substeps for right now. And I'm also just going to get rid of that. We'll set it back down to 1. So this is kind of masking or setting like a range or a window of basically 0.05 to half a second, roughly. It would inject the divergence or expand things. If you want to double check that or kind of verify it or whatever, you could completely disable the divergence by attribute, and then you're not going to get any expansion or growth of the particles. And with the visualization here, I am visualizing the divergence attribute. So if you go down here, this is that, or you could go back to the speed, and that would be how you're probably used to seeing it. But I was just debugging things, so I set it divergence, and maybe the upper range should be a little bit higher. But basically the brighter values here is where it would expand. Maybe we want to try, I don't know, something like that. And then it's just being controlled using the vex snippet in here. So if we enable divergence by attribute again, this would be more of a subtle, minimal type of effect. Or we could go more crazy, over the top. Extra nodes, thanks for joining. Better late than never. So you can see this is really getting boosted, or divergence is basically just uniformly going to expand things in every direction. But the reason I was doing the noise is so it's not just getting to like a Q-tip blurry sphere. This hopefully should give you just some different, more natural shapes or stuff like that. So that was the main reason I was doing the noise. And you could also play around as well with this range. Like, it just depends how immediate of an expansion or whatever you want. I liked a little bit of a delay or a lag from like when it was emitted to when it expanded, but you can reduce this range if you want to get a more immediate foam or something like that. And then, yeah, just the last one, viscosity. This is just some kind of exponential growth function. And then you can scale that as well using the physical. So if I don't divide that by as much, we should get more stiff hardening of the particle shape more quickly. So I'm going to go back into the stop level. I'm just going to take a look at this expression again. I think we want I think this should be good. I'm just trying to double check that the math I had was correct. So yeah, this is one way to verify it. The other thing I was playing around with is you could create your own noise, and with this one you could do like each component of the rest. So this would be more of like a 3D noise. So this is kind of like a pre-visualization of what you might get with the actual render, but if you're just checking to verify that the stuff works, that's another option to look at. You can see maybe. Something like that. But yeah, that's that's pretty much all I have for this one so far. I'll probably keep playing around with this and do some more testing and flipbooks, um, and just play around. Obviously, these render results aren't super terrific, um, so I want to definitely spend some more time on the shader. And I think that I still need to figure out some stuff that's going on with the rest um, textures. Like this stuff here looks really good, but some areas as well overall don't look as good. So yeah, have you tried the background plate in Solaris? I don't think I have. I, I was doing something like that for my own, for the paper project. In that one, I just had a sphere that I was assigning like a HDR texture to. And then I just turned the like primary, secondary, I think it was only visible to primary rays in the render settings. But I didn't even know that they had a background plate built in. So this is just a flipbook here that I was doing with the current kind of low res settings. But you can see basically turning down that noise on the emitter. It's going to be a more smooth, less spiky shape, and it's definitely getting rid of those parts that we're ripping off. And as well, just tweaking the divergence. It's expanding more quickly and then shutting down after like, I think it was a quarter of a second I set it to right now. So you have pretty good control over all those aspects. Any advice on compositing live action footage in Houdini? I've never done the full pipeline compositing in Houdini. I've always used Nuke or another software package for the final steps. But I know sometimes people will project the background plate from the render camera like onto the geometry if they want it to show up in reflections or stuff like that when you render. But overall, I don't think a ton of people are using the current version or iteration of COPS or doing very much like actual 2K or full like footage-based compositing inside of Houdini, just because it's more slow, or it hasn't, the compositing aspect of the software hasn't been worked on or updated in a long time in terms of Houdini. But there was, Steve did share somewhere in here. It does look like the side effects company is looking to fill a role to update their compositing software. I saw some interesting bits in here that they were looking to do some GPU. I don't know where. Yeah, I don't know if they got too in depth, but it seems to me like, okay, here it is: optimize image algorithms to work equally on both CPU and GPU. So my guess would be they're trying to get some better compositing optimizations and stuff like that built in. But yeah, overall, I think, I don't know, I mean, this is probably a long way off if they're just looking to fill this role and then they need to actually do the development and then get it into a release. But eventually, one day, hopefully, we'll have a more robust compositing render engine. Houdini 25. How to use tone maps that go along with HDRs? I don't remember about using tone maps. Oh, well, there's the one website, I forget, that supplies the tone mapped HDR with it.